Hello and welcome to another video. So I have a question for you. If you have used Linux, when was the first time you could try it? I don't mean starting to use it seriously, but when was your first contact at all with desktop Linux? For me it was Ubuntu in the early 2010s. Through a process of elimination, I'm fairly sure it was 12.04, released in 2012. I'll get to that in a moment. As it was just Ubuntu's 20th anniversary and it was what my last video was about, I thought of taking a trip down my memory lane and taking another look at the distro I got to try first. I have been thinking of covering it anyways. First, how did I discover Ubuntu? As I said, it was near the start of the last decade. At that time we had one of those kinda noisy desktop boxes with a 4x3 monitor running Windows XP. That was our family computer. It was probably my father installing it, but for whatever reason a dual boot between that XP system and the Ubuntu was set up. I was maybe like 6-7 at that time. Of course I didn't care about computer science, browsing, productive work, system customization, any of that. I just wanted to play some kind of games while I had the time. I'll likely take a look at a few games in this video. Still, I have fond memories of the graphical interface. Of course, the computer in question broke down many years ago, so I can't tell or show exactly what it was like, but let's take a look at something like that on my current laptop. If I didn't take much interest to Linux itself back then, why do I say it must have been 12.04? Well, I remember it had an early edition of Unity Desktop. It had like a purple shiny background and the panels had these colorful bubbly icons to open programs. The previous LTS 10.04 did not have the Unity interface. The following LTS 14.04 had a more blocky background and the app menu wasn't as colorful. For the releases between those I've mentioned, either the wallpaper or something about the application launcher didn't add up with what I remember. These are also short-term systems, not something that's supposed to be used for years. The setup must also have been before 2014, because at that point I got to excite over new levels in one of the games after already using the system for some time. So that leaves Ubuntu 12.04 as the most probable and what I'll be testing in the video. Before I move on with that addition, a disclaimer I'd like to remind you here. Ubuntu 12 was made 12 years ago in 2012 and it stopped receiving updates in 2017. That means its software is really old by now and it has missed out on over 7 years of security updates. While I'm kind of promoting and reviewing the OS here, it is for nostalgia and trying out. You should not actually use it as your operating system of choice. That also applies to other Linux releases that are out of support. With that out of the way, how do you install old Ubuntu releases? The easy way is to just look up the specific version on a search engine. Ready for the other way? On the official Ubuntu download page, there is a link to other downloads in fine print under the latest release. From there, go to past releases, all past releases. This takes you to releases.ubuntu that hosts all editions of Ubuntu that still have any kind of support remaining, free or paid, with earliest being 14.04. That's not enough, we have to go deeper, to old releases. This goes to a database of every edition of Ubuntu previously released. The website starts looking more and more primitive. And now from here I can select Ubuntu 12.04.5, precise pangolin. Many of you would probably take the first option, x86 desktop, but there certainly are plenty of files here. All this introduction for the distro and I still haven't even started it up for the video. Let's talk about getting it to run first. It's meant for 32-bit computers, but also supports AMD 64-bit processors. It seems to have a poor support for UEFI. The disk image is about 700 megabytes in size. A 700 meg processor and half a gigabyte of memory can do, apparently. It does not seem to work from a Ventoy drive on my current laptop. Probably because I converted the system to UEFI a while ago. It throws an error about a missing UEFI bootloader and then gets stuck on the loading screen. I did manage to get it to run on my previous laptop. I will also briefly use recordings from a virtual machine, but I'll get to why I couldn't use the VM for most of the showcase. Let's start with the virtual machine and I'll show you the installation. When starting up, a peculiar icon is displayed at the bottom for a moment. I assume it's the H key for some kind of accessibility settings, but it's apparently press any key for the boot menu. Can I just say here, the blinking dots under the logo is a really classic, brings back memories. Opening up the disk image, you're greeted with a language selection and choosing whether to try the live demo or install Ubuntu. Clicking Try Ubuntu restarts the GUI and goes to the live environment. Install Ubuntu continues with the installation on the first boot environment. The installer looks quite similar to what we had 10 years later still. First off, it checks whether the recommendations for a smooth installation are met. You can opt in to proprietary software and applying updates during the installation. You get to choose between using the whole disk for Ubuntu, manual partitioning and maybe some other options depending on what is already on the drives. Then the installer starts installing while the user has yet to set up localization and user account. I kinda like the idea of starting to install the first chance it gets while the account still has to be set up. It likely saves a bit of time. The installation on this VM took about 2.5 minutes. When exiting the live environment, it requests you to remove the USB or CD before shutting down. My experience running it in VirtualBox was kind of a mess. It runs and installs fine, but 3D acceleration is utterly broken. It often gets stuck on a black screen, and when it does open, it still doesn't work, so you can forget about auto resize and any kind of hardware acceleration. I tried it with an older version of VirtualBox on Windows. Even when it got past just displaying the wallpaper, which it often didn't, it froze a lot. That leaves it with a small screen, underpowered and with minimal effects. At least the screen size can be somewhat changed from the system settings. I actually got it running on my current laptop by putting it on a separate USB drive. This is where I did most of the checking and recording. As is implied in this video, getting the distro to run fine nowadays is such a chore. Let's discuss what probably strikes first in the desktop operating system, I mean the graphical interface. As I mentioned, it uses a kind of earlier released Unity desktop from the makers of Ubuntu itself. As it runs the GNOME programs, Unity is rather merely a graphical shell than a full environment. But this doesn't change the fact that you get a somewhat different layout and functionality. There is a top bar with system tray on the right. This includes the common elements like session settings, clock, volume and network, but also user account. What's the most interesting here is that settings for a messaging program are put here, apparently for empathy internet messaging. You do still get a system tray for background programs like I have a screen recorder here. Notifications pop up under the status bar. Strangely, the notifications blur when hovering over them. Volume level is also displayed there. When shutting down, the prompt is pretty generic. On Ubuntu 14.04 and later ones with Unity, I saw a much cooler looking one, but I guess it wasn't made for Ubuntu 12 yet. I think the login screen for Linux Mint still uses that. On the left of the display, there is an application panel called Launcher. The first icon on it is Dash, which is like Unity's own menu. It has 5 tabs between which you can switch with the buttons on the bottom. The first tab shows just 6 recently used tabs and files. The lists can be expanded. The second tab brings recent apps up again, but this time adds 2 more categories. All installed apps and suggestions for apps to download. The rest just show file directories, home and recent files, music and videos. On the top left corner there is a button to maximize Dash, but I like it more when it's in the top left corner like that. The top bar also turns transparent while the menu is in use. Unless you're hovering on it, Launcher will also be grayed out at that point. Couple things about the dash. I'm not sure if the first tab should be the first tab or a separate tab at all, because it's also a part of the second and third tab that are more useful but also more crowded. It also isn't the fastest to access a full list of installed programs. You'd have to open dash, go to the second tab, expand the installed category, scroll the list to find the program and then click on the icon. That's 5 clicks to run the program that way. One of them scroll or click and drag. By pressing Alt, you get another search bar. I think it's called HUD. I'm not sure what it's supposed to search for, but it has some kind of results. What follows in the panel are pinned and running applications. I mean, they're locked to the launcher. Unity seems to like using its own words for the features. Arrows on the left show running instances of an app, and an arrow on the right signifies a currently focused app. The program in focus is also considered on the left of the top bar. The title of the program is written there, and if you hover over it, the app menu. Unity does in fact have a global app menu. Certainly not all apps support the global app menu, as you can see with LibreOffice here. When full screen, program's title bar is merged with the top bar, so window controls move over there, which is interesting but does save space. I'm not a big fan of how program controls are only seen when hovering over them. I think they should always be visible. And yes, minimize, maximize and close buttons are on the left in Unity. By right clicking on an icon, you get options for opening the app in a different state. For any app currently in the taskbar, you can lock or unlock it from the right click menu. Also, I do like how each icon is in a colorful bubble or something. I like how Ubuntu desktop has a title bar and global menu options, and a dash has maximize and close buttons, as if they are also applications. Right below the apps is a workplace switcher. Unity comes with 4 workspaces you can run different programs in. It is about which programs are in your way at a time. Yes, Linux had workspaces before Windows and Mac. It takes a few clicks to switch between them though. And lastly, the bottom of the launcher has a shortcut to the trash folder. I was wondering if I could drag the launcher icons to reorder them. Apparently not, but I can move them all around like that, which... okay. This can probably help if all icons don't fit there all at once, but otherwise looks a bit weird. When the launcher runs out of space, the icons at the bottom start falling like that. Also, I wanted to record this on real hardware, because without hardware acceleration, the desktop loses quite a bit of its elegance. This includes fades, lighting effects and shadows. Slowly transitioning to the topic of programs. System settings relates to both the programs and GUI. There are the usual hardware settings. I think I will change keyboard layout and date. Appearance settings are really minimal. You can choose a background from built-in wallpapers, an image from the pictures folder, or just a simple color or gradient. Under hardware acceleration, the launcher uses an accent color taken from the background. There actually are a few themes to choose from. The launcher can be set to auto hide, otherwise that's it. And of course, Canonical, the company behind Ubuntu, advertises some of their services in the settings, namely Landscape and Ubuntu One for cloud storage. Ubuntu One is also neatly pinned on the launcher. Ubuntu got some heat and privacy concerns in the Unity days for integrating Amazon Store into the system, sending user searches to the shop. As you can see, this wasn't the case in 12.04 yet. Okay, here are all programs installed by default. I did install a video recorded though. I can see plenty of them related to system settings. I guess the default apps come from the GNOME ecosystem of that time. To install apps graphically, there is Ubuntu Software Center. That 3D shopping guide with glowing stuff is also nostalgic. First up, there are plenty of categories. Some have subcategories, others just dump everything into one list. Plenty of programs are available in Universe source that has to be enabled first. This is where I ran into a big issue. After a distro has been out of support for a while, its software repositories get archived. This means they are not in the main servers and cannot be accessed normally. It really seemed like no programs could be installed. This would have been especially troubling because I need a screen recorder for the video. Let's try looking online for a fix. Firefox is version 26, we're in the 130s now. It's such a big difference. Bars on the top look really old, and that's for an empty start page. Google isn't looking that much better. Firefox is so old it just refuses to load most websites due to not being secure. Apparently what you're supposed to do is replace all instances of archive.ubuntu.com with old releases.ubuntu.com in a config file. Using sudo is required, but you can use a terminal text editor like nano or graphical like gedit. File is /etc/apt/sources.list. I tried doing it manually, but it still did not work. I found this article by Stephen R. Lang that Firefox actually managed to open and had a working configuration. You can see some black rectangles, guess the browser must have glitched. Anyway, now the downloads worked, that's great! I was almost about to give up and showcase an underpowered virtual machine with pre-installed apps. So Firefox is very behind with version 26, but what about other apps? For package management, the user-friendly app does not yet exist, so that's a lot of suggestions. You have to use apt-get, which apt later improves and unifies with apt-cache and apt-config. apt-get itself doesn't feel completely finished, being version 0.8. It is still on Python 2 coding, which was discontinued in 2020. Python 3 is available to download, but by no means the default. Linux kernel is version 3.11. For comparison, we have 6.11 now instead. It comes with LibreOffice 3.5 for document work. On the graphics category in the store, I recognize apps like Blender, Inkscape and GIMP. For coding IDEs, I installed Genie on the Debian XFCE environment on the Saturday session, and I've used code blocks as I'm learning C++. Now I move on to gaming, with which I have the most experience on Ubuntu 12.04. Let's begin with pre-installed games. All of them seem to be part of the GNOME ecosystem. First is Ale Riot Solitaire, which was still pre-installed in Ubuntu until this year. This is a collection of solitaire card games. For some reason, FreeCell is also included as a separate program. I haven't given FreeCell a good try. Next is Minesweeper. At first I was worried about the window size, but it resizes when you start the game. This doesn't look that much like the GNOME Minesweeper of today, instead more like the one in Windows XP. Unfortunately, I didn't get very far on this attempt, but I can play Minesweeper. Well, there are also Mahjong and Sudoku. I really haven't done much Sudoku either. Alright, now I'll take a look at some games in the repositories. I found Hearts card game from GNOME. I haven't seen any Hearts games in modern Linux repos. If you have a repo set up, you can just click install. Apps from the graphical software manager are typically added to the launcher on the left automatically. Seems like a pretty solid Hearts game, though there is plenty of click to continue. The sports subcategory has the most of what I'm familiar with. Here is a big one, X-Moto. This is a 2D physics-based motorcycle racing game where you have to get all the collectibles and try and drive to the finished item on a pretty tricky terrain. This distro is where I discovered X-Moto and has since become one of my most played games. The levels are made by players, although they have to be verified by moderators. I actually made an X-Moto level in late 2021, that game. After some improvements, it was approved as an official level. For each level, the best time overall world record is noted. The VR on this level I randomly got is Risp. He is a Discord friend of mine. I even got silver medal here, nice. The levels here look kinda plain and old. Since this is a 2012 build, it only has the oldest 270 levels. How many do you miss out on? Just over 3,000. I mentioned I was obsessing over some new levels in 2014. This is the game. On my current profile, I have 700 hours played and about 1,700 completed levels since 2015, so yeah, I had some time with it. I've downloaded some more mostly familiar games and the launcher is looking a bit crowded now. Here's another one I do remember, Super Tux Kart. Was this really how the main menu looked and sounded back then is different from now? I guess there is no story about only just racing. This is like Mario Kart with open source mascots. On recent versions I often go with Kongi, he looks kind of cute. But on this old version I changed my mind after seeing it. Yo, it's the old desert theme. I remember this song well. It got replaced because of copyright on later versions, but it's memorable and a banger. I guess the old interface effects look older. I remember there being a level with blocks and toys. Is it this Oliver's math class? Star Trek, I don't remember that being in the latest version. Riding on a trail in space between planets to ambient music as I see. Truly epic drifting right here. The thing saving me from going off the track is literally a reset button. Well, yes, X-Moto and Super Tux Kart are the most memorable Linux games for me. Oh, this is how Super Tux platforming game looked back then. Looks old. I don't remember playing it back then, but it seems related to SDK and I finally tried it at the end of last year. Super Tux has been released for 20 years by now and still not finished. But if this is what the game was like back in 2012, I see a progress has been made. To be fair, I saw Super Tux and Super Tux 2 in the list and took the first one. You cannot scroll the view to the left, preventing you from backtracking. Did it just say excellent when I got the egg? Guys, I think the first level might be impossible. I cannot make the jump here. When I closed Super Tux, it reported it as a crash. This next one is full billiard. You have to aim and change the amount of force with arrow keys. Doesn't feel the smoothest. Wait, how is ball going here? Didn't I aim the other way? Fortunately, there is billiard GL. You still have to aim by rotating the view, but it's smoother. Were full billiard and billiard GL the pool games I played? I think so, but I'm not completely sure. Maybe I also tried free tennis, but how to play it? Maybe I'm getting the hang of it. I vaguely remember the humans throwing red, but what is this about? Then I played Torx, which is more like a real car race. Well, I already lost control and crashed. This is Armageddon. Wait, how do you control it? So it's Z and X to turn, how was I supposed to know? So basically the cycle leaves behind a neon trail and you have to make the opponent crash into it. Also the AI opponents seem to be named after Microsoft Office. It's not the most fun game, but it exists and I've tried it. After a few attempts, I got the opponent trapped in its own trail. I vaguely remember something about a red and blue plane. Could this be the one? No, I didn't recognize it and it crashed immediately. Then there was Eltris, which I wanted to try at some point, but couldn't. The funny story is that our whole family simply forgot the user password at one point. We could log in fine, but couldn't install or remove anything. Anyway, yeah, Eltris is indeed a Tetris clone for Linux. It seems to have levels and different backgrounds for them. Okay, that concludes the gaming session. It was interesting but also kind of underwhelming. Let's now look at how old the productivity apps are. Inkscape, the vector graphics drawing program, is version 0.48. I actually have no idea what the latest version is. Apparently 1.4. Blender, the common 3D modeling software, is version 2.62. Latest version 4.2.2. While I have used the program, it looks quite different from version 4 and later 3.x versions. Where's edit mode? It seems to struggle with rendering when I resize the window. I have used later versions of Blender myself. Am I right that it's popular between amateur and enthusiast 3D modelers? Wine used for running Windows programs on Linux is included here, with version 1.4, latest 9.20. It requests your permission to install MSDTF fonts. It's one of those terminal prompts you navigate with tab. Wine interface looks similar to what it is like now, yet it's with Windows XP in mind by default. Ubuntu has trouble reading modern Linux file systems. I can't access my current main distro files. Even if I were to try to run a game, it probably wouldn't work, because Wine support was questionable even in Ubuntu 22.04. VirtualBox comes in 4.1 edition, latest 7.1.4. The 4.x series should still be available in VirtualBox's own archive, but of course I can't get there with the stub Firefox. I will try installing a dev file, but because of Firefox and file system issues I don't have access to any. GIMP opens with 3 windows, each having its own tools. That's an interesting and kinda confusing layout. This is the well-known image editing program that is called the complicated Photoshop alternative. That is version 2.6, maybe latest 2.10. This is Kdenlive, the Linux native video editor. This actually doesn't look all that different. I would probably find a way around this. Still, this is version 0.8.2 with latest being 24.08, probably named after August 2024, similarly to Ubuntu. So this is actually how KDE and Kongi looked back then. I think the current Kongi looks much cuter and more welcoming. Even though it looks familiar, I'm editing the video with the latest version of Kdenlive and not this one. It told me there are updates available on Restart, but I have no idea what there is to update, and I probably can't apply updates to the live demo environment. I did also get to play a CD album I have. Not putting the music in this video because copyright, but it works. A friend once loaned me a movie on DVD, and I didn't manage to play it on Ubuntu 20.04. Playing audio CD is still not as easy on KDE Plasma. Maybe someone is still watching this, but I have very faint memories of a screensaver I quite liked. Unity has no screensavers built in, but we got them somewhere. The scene in question was something about a cube flying through a colorful star field or something. If someone is watching and could perhaps point me to the screensaver, that would be great. So, what are my thoughts about playing around a bit on Ubuntu 12.04? First, it really was pain just getting into a state where I can record the system and use stuff on it. On virtual machine, any kind of acceleration completely froze it. On real hardware, it only started up on some systems. I've been trying to make the video for 2 weeks. I really advise not to use it for anything serious. I kinda like the Unity layout, but I probably wouldn't use it over modern GNOME and KDE that we have now. One of the main criticisms is how the elements in the menu or dash are laid out. If you want the Unity experience on a modern distro, there is Ubuntu Unity. I think it's looking a bit too flat and even so feeling outdated. The programs here did feel old and somewhat underwhelming, but getting such a primitive and outdated experience makes me appreciate where we are with program support and gaming today. You may feel like Linux programs look old even today, but think of what state they could still be in. So that was an interesting experience in its own way. It's great, would not recommend at all. This was Ubuntu 12.04, and I guess that's it for this video. Perhaps like and subscribe for more computer related videos, and bye for now.